Hello, and welcome to In the Jumpseat, a podcast by CUPE Local 8125, WestJet Component, for WestJet cabin crew and other listeners. My name is Cameron Jones, recording secretary for the Local, and your host for today's episode. Today we're bringing you a full bargaining update for WestJet Mainline flight attendants. I'm joined by our President Alia Hussain to walk through where we are at in the process, what's been achieved so far, and what's ahead. Since our last episode, there have been a lot of updates, and we're going to start with where we're at in the bargaining cycle. Alia, before we jump into where things stand today, can you maybe walk us through the preparation phase and what our recent town halls meant for this round of bargaining?
Sure, Cameron. So I'm going to start by sharing that we just completed last week town halls across all of our Canadian bases, well, permanent bases, that is. So we visited from the west to the east. We went from Vancouver to Edmonton to Calgary. Then we took off to Toronto, Montreal, and finished in Winnipeg. And I want to say thank you to every single member that took the time out of their busy schedules to attend the 3-hour sessions, ask questions, and engage. I have to say we had incredible feedback from the membership. We had a lot of questions asked, a lot of discussion had about the various proposals. And one of the cool things about these sessions is that it was to advise the membership of the outcome of the bargaining survey 1 and how the bargaining survey results ultimately ended up driving and shaping the proposals, and that all proposals presented were a direct result of membership feedback.
And I think on that note, it was an excellent opportunity for us to actually engage with our members in person, because sometimes being such a mobile workforce with members from coast to coast to coast, having the opportunity to actually engage in person is really important, especially when we're in such an integral year such as bargaining. So can you maybe walk us through what some of the common themes or common things we heard from the members were during our town halls?
We heard about wages as our number one priority. We talked a lot about unpaid work, and that also showed up in the survey. It was elimination of all aspects of unpaid work. We talked a lot about scheduling, construction, and we talked a lot about benefits. Those were identified as the top 4. Of course, we talked about many other things such as reserve, rest. We talked about modified duties, and all, you name it, we discussed it.
And I think it's important to note, especially for our local, we have our first collective agreement, which obviously is a monumental agreement to get to in the first place. However, the negotiations for a second collective agreement, if not, can be even harder, because now you have existing language and you're looking at changing or adjusting that language to ensure that it now reflects the needs of our membership. And that was one of the main points we were hitting home, is that our bargaining proposals are directly rooted in the membership's mandate. So Alia, can you maybe walk us through what some of the common themes or questions that we may have heard from the members during these sessions for the folks that weren't able to attend?
Yeah, for sure. So some of the common themes were respect and recognition for the flight attendant role. We also heard a lot of concerns about scheduling, fatigue, and work-life balance for our membership, and that was from junior all the way to senior. We, through the survey results and through the questions, there were a lot of demands for compensation that reflect our contributions to our organization's success. And of course, as a result of this being only our second collective agreement, there was a lot of desire for clearer protections in the agreement. And of course, all of this was unified by, when you look at what the committee's proposals are, all our proposals reflected these pieces of feedback.
So now that we've officially started negotiations with the company, can you maybe explain to the members what it means to serve notice to bargain and what that kind of triggers under the Canada Labour Code?
So notice to bargain, we served it on September 16th, and what that means is it's the first official legal step to start bargaining. It triggers statutory requirements and timelines and forces the company to meet us within 20 days of issuing notice to bargain, and it opens the door to the negotiations for the entire collective agreement.
And I think it's important for the membership to understand that the collective bargaining process in Canada is deeply rooted within the Canada Labour Code. And one of those things in the entire process is coming to what's called an essential services agreement. So can you maybe break down what that is and why it's so important, as well as, we've communicated this to the membership already, but we've taken the position that none of WestJet's flying is essential in the event of a strike, lockout, or job action scenario. So can you maybe walk us through a little bit of what that means and what that looks like?
87.4 of the code states that during a strike or lockout not prohibited by Part 1 of the code, the bargaining agent and the members of the bargaining unit have to maintain certain activities that is necessary to provide services, operation of facilities, or protections of good to the extent necessary to prevent an immediate and serious danger to the safety and health of the public. So I just read the exact definition from the Labor Code. After a very brief discussion with the company, we established that there are no essential services provided by the WestJet Mainline Flight Attendant Group, and that WestJet operations do not meet that threshold. Our position, of course, was we're not essential, and the company agreed, and so we will be filing that with the Industrial Relations Board shortly.
I appreciate that explanation, Alia, as I know it's one of those things that can be a little bit confusing when we look at the Canada Labour Code and some of the language. I know when you read the definition, it sounds some kind of way, so I appreciate the clarity around that, and that step is kind of the box is ticked. So, Alia, you mentioned earlier that we had served notice to bargain on September the 16th, and our first meeting with the company had to take place within 20 days. And in fact, we've already now had our first set of negotiations with the company, which started on September the 22nd. So our timeline's moving quickly, which is excellent. So how important is it that we keep that momentum going in the room?
So quick turnaround shows readiness, and our bargaining committee is very ready, very committed, very dedicated to keeping this bargaining process going, because our membership made it very clear to us that they don't want to spend one extra day under this collective agreement than necessary, and the bargaining committee and the executive committee recognizes this. It also keeps pressure on the company. So as a bargaining committee, we've accepted back-to-back dates to keep the momentum going. And it sets the tone. It sets the tone that, one, the bargaining committee means business, and two, that the membership knows that we have heard them loud and clear, and we're going to get them the collective agreement that they deserve as soon as reasonably possible.
That's really important. That key point that you said is that we understand that this membership doesn't want to work within this collective agreement for a day longer than necessary. And a great example is that is immediately after our bargaining committee elections finished, I think it was within 5 days, if not less, we had the bargaining committee in Calgary in training to continue on this process of getting bargaining done. And we have a commitment from the company, as indicated in the first week, that they are just as committed to ensuring that these negotiations are completed in a meaningful way, but also ensuring that it's done within appropriate timelines as well.
You bet. And the other piece there is that we did hit the ground running. I just want us all to recognize this is a marathon, not a sprint. So by no means are we rushing it, but we are maintaining constant and consistent pace as we go through this to keep it moving in a timely fashion.
Thanks for that, Alia. So as we said, we had the first meeting with the company on September 22nd. And on that day, both sides, the company and the union, had exchanged opening statements. And I have to say, sitting in the room and listening to you deliver the opening statement was an incredibly powerful message. And so can you maybe walk us through, for the membership, what were some of the key messages that we wanted to deliver WestJet to understand what's at stake in this round of negotiations?
Yeah, that was one of the most meaningful messages I've ever had the privilege of delivering on behalf of this membership. So from my perspective, one of the key points I wanted to ensure that the company understood unequivocally is that change must happen now. And one of the things, as a longstanding WestJetter, I wanted the company to also understand was that some of us will know it as the wobble board, others will know it as the cycle, but it was the old adage that WestJet used to consistently drive home to both the members and, of course, other departments within WestJet, was that if the company takes care of cabin crew take care of the guests, and the guests, of course, take care of the business. And it was that cycle that made us an incredibly successful organization. And I wanted to ensure that the company understood that we understood that, but had they? And that from our perspective, they had dropped the ball and broken that cycle. And this round of bargaining is about correcting that and getting back to that very cycle that made us incredibly successful. And then the other piece, of course, is that we wanted to ensure that the company understood that investing in our cabin crew is investing in WestJet's success. There's a direct correlation. We are the longest human touch point our guests experience, and we have the opportunity to fly them between point A to point B under every circumstance possible, whether it's a wedding, whether it's a funeral, and everything, or a business trip and everything in between. And that it's us that deliver that guest experience. And we are also clearly identified as a piece of the brand in Alexis's own words. So from my perspective, that was like the intention. And also, of course, the immediacy piece surrounded the fact that we are in a cost of living crisis.
So moving on to the actual bargaining room or the beginning of negotiations. So bargaining often starts with non-monetary items. So Alia, can you maybe give our listeners an idea of what articles we've begun working through in the first week of bargaining?
Yeah, so non-monetary items, no financial value attached. You usually put these ones first so that way you can get a sense for how each side bargains and kind of the temperature of each side. Examples of articles that came up in the first week were things like probation, management rights, preamble, and amendments to the collective agreement. These are examples of non-monetary amendments, and we went through them. We had some proposals, the company had some proposals, and they went back and forth. And we were effectively able to complete 3 of the few articles that we passed across the table. And what this does is starts to build the foundation before we move into tackling monetary items. So we're getting, I guess, some of the housekeeping items and some of the framework to the side, and then we'll move into monetary items.
Absolutely. And I think it's important that we recognize that sometimes non-monetary items, I think for folks, seem like it might be insignificant items, but some of these articles are really important, and every detail, and I think we've learned this through the length of the first collective agreement, is that every word, every comma, it truly does have an impact on our working conditions. And like you mentioned, we do have 3 articles that have already been tentatively agreed to, or we have agreements in principle. And for the membership, I just want to plug that we do actually have a negotiation tracker on our website so that you can keep in the loop as to how progress is being made at the table. And that's on our website. It's wjcomponent.ca/negotiation-tracker. You can also find it under the mainline bargaining tab at the top of our website, but that will typically be updated every week that we complete negotiations. I will put a caveat in there, especially as we move throughout the negotiation cycle. There may be some times where you see a lot of movement, or when you are tackling more complex sections, such as when we get to section 34, 35, which is scheduling reserve, you might not see a lot of movement during those weeks just because they are significant articles with lots of language that needs to be negotiated and then verified as well. So I just wanted to plug that in there for the membership. So we've mentioned we have reached some tentative agreements. So what does that progress look like so far? And can you maybe give us some insight as to how the actual interactions with the company are going?
So as far as the tone in the room and the engagement from both sides of the table, it was very respectful. It's very professional. And it was very meaningful. It set the tone for and established what will be the relationship as we move forward. So both sides are aware that both sides are committed, prepared, and ready. We spent a lot of hours in the room carefully analyzing some of the proposals because the first one, which is the preamble, sets the foundation for the framework, I guess is the better way to describe it, for what the relationship looks like for both the company and the union. And it's also an interesting note that it is the article almost always consistently grieved in every single grievance we file. So there were some improvements that we saw there.
Thanks for that, Alia. And I wanted to touch on, we also had some of the executive leadership team come into the room this week, which was very welcome. We had Alexis, WestJet CEO, as well as we had Diedrich, the president of WestJet, come in and share some words. And can you maybe pass along their sentiment to what they shared about how they see the process going and what how their sentiments were when they came in?
For sure. So Alexis came in first to visit us, and his sentiment is he wanted us to understand that he is committed to seeing this bargaining process through and done so in a timely manner. Following Alexis came in Dietrich Penn, who is the president of WestJet, and he also reiterated his sentiment, commitment to cabin personnel, a lot of respect for the working group, anything we needed just to let him know, and that he looks forward to reaching a collective agreement that both parties can be proud of.
Yeah, and that's those commitments are echoed on the union side, and that we're committed to being at the table and ensuring that we get an agreement that works for our cabin crew at the table in this round of negotiations. So having them come by was, like I said, it was very welcomed in this first week of our second collective agreement negotiations.
It is a positive indication when the CEO and the president show up to the first week of bargaining. It's definitely a positive indication, and both sides are committed. So let's see where this goes.
Thanks for walking us through essentially what's gone on this first week of bargaining, as well as providing an update of how we've got to where we're at today. Alia, are you able to give us a message that you'd like to leave with the members right now about where we're at in the process?
What I want the membership to know is that this is a steady progress and it'll be step by step, and that the engagement from the membership makes us stronger at the table. We spoke about this in the town halls, that the bargaining committee was only 30% of the entire equation. The large, vast majority of power that the bargaining committee has for our bargaining position comes from the membership. They make up 70% of the equation. This round of bargaining is about respect, fairness, compensation that reflects our true value. So membership engagement will fundamentally make that difference. And we ask that our membership stay tuned for regular updates, because our commitment is to keep our membership informed every step of the way, whether it's through emails, podcasts, the website. Our commitment is that the membership are brought along for the journey to CA2.
Amazing. Thank you for that, Alia. And I think one of the small things that's really important or sends a very strong message and shows our unity is wearing your union pin. We recently sent out a communication with clarification from what uniform standards are. And we have our MESI committee members, our member engagement committee members in every base. They have pins. We distributed them to our representatives during our town halls, and wearing your pin on your blazer lapel, it really does send a strong message of unity, because like you said, the power at the bargaining table comes from the membership. So thank you, Alia, for joining us today, and thank you to our listeners for attending and listening to today's podcast. Make sure to check in and follow us on social media. We're on Instagram at WestJet Component, as well as on Facebook as WestJet Component as well. We really appreciate you listening and joining us for this episode of In the Jumpseat.